All right. Yeah, welcome back everybody, and for those three that are watching online, I'm going to hand it over to Mark and Chris, who are going to walk us through the quarterly activity report. That's item 8.3 in the agenda on page 39. Over to you, Mark. Oh, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning. So this is our third and fourth quarter activity report, the last one for the financial year. This slide deck is really walking us through the report, and the bulk of that will be from page 50 in the agenda. I'll give a quick overview of KPIs and projects, and then we'll talk through council work programs and the activities by cluster. And I apologise if the use of the term cluster triggers any COVID-related concerns. Yeah. It's just our way we refer to groups of activities. And I'll hand over to GMs after a couple of slides. So we're reporting on 19 projects in this report. 4 of those were not on target, and the reasons will be talked through as we step through the activities. We have 95 KPIs with targets. We have 13 not achieved, and that compares with 12 last financial year. There's a few that aren't yet due, a few that are on target, still to come. So it's a little bit confusing here at the moment, but by the time we report our annual report figures, that will be cleared up a bit more. And there's more detail on in the activity chapters in the appendix to the report. That's from page 50. At this point, I'll hand over to James Jefferson to talk through the Provincial Growth Fund, and this is from page 52 to 53 of the agenda.
So team, just while Mr Jefferson comes to the table, we'll just keep referring to the page numbers, because I know that even myself, you can get lost in the body of the report. So we're on 52 to 53 at the moment.
Good morning, Mr Chairman, Your Worship, councillors and community board members. I knew you were going to say we'll refer to page numbers. In an effort to be green, I printed out only one set of papers, and I've got the public version on the which doesn't from the website, which doesn't have page numbers. So just bear with me. But look, in terms of the PGF, as you're aware, the successful funding of $2 million from PGF for Gateway, conditional of course on future decisions by council and commitment and comfort by communities. So that is a gateway, if you like, that we've gone through. Really exciting application, and it is the Aotaki Rangatahi initiative that Liana Hill has been working on, and all of the indicators are positive. We still haven't had a final decision. The third bullet point there, we've put 4 applications in for council properties that meet the criteria. Again, notwithstanding we haven't had final decisions, there's a couple of positive indicators there, and some more work to be done. We've also worked, I think the ED team worked closely with one of the Aotaki Marae on wayfinding, and that, the fact that there was the fund available and they could access that as well. So that's good in that partnership space. And then lastly is and it's been around for a while now, that 1 billion trees application, and I understand they've come back for more information, and we're just navigating our way through. So there's a massive amount of work that sits behind those and getting those applications in, and of course a lot of that was done during level 4 and level 3 lockdown. So fingers crossed there will be some really good outcomes out of that for the district.
Thank you, Mr Jefferson. And I have Councillor Randall first up for questions.
Thank you. I'm annoyed about this last sentence on page 53, where they say there's misinformation. I mean, the misinformation could be coming from, I think these sort of reports should be more objective and say there are different views. But to say there is misinformation...
Councillor Randall, I will allow you to continue on. I'm not trying to cut you off. but I just want to remind people just to stick to a question. If it is a comment, then you can save it for debate. So I'm going to allow you the speaker again, but is there a question in what you, being unhappy with the statement isn't a question. So
Okay. The question is, should the wording for that last sentence be changed to be more objective?
I'll talk. Noted, and in hindsight, we could have more careful with the wording. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. Mr. Randall, did you have any further questions? Thank you, Councillor Hanford.
Kia ora, just wondering if we have any indication of when we might get a response back around the Otaki Rangatahi initiative?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm hoping a couple of weeks, but I anticipate it depends what happens in Auckland and diversion. But as soon as we get something concrete and that we can divulge, because I've been my staff have said you can't talk about the detail and quantums because it's all embargoed, but as soon as we hear something that we can release, we absolutely will.
Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jefferson, number 4, the Renovation Fund, there's 2 or 4 properties there. Are you able to tell us what those properties are at all? That's the 2 council-owned buildings and 2 community-owned buildings on reserved land that are potentially up for the Renovation Fund.
Yeah, look, I will. Mr. Chair, through. So definitely the Papauma Memorial Hall and Otaki Theatre. And if you just bear with me, let me find. Thank you. Thank you. Just let me find the email. As you'll be aware, I was away doing some COVID-y things during this. I'm not over the detail, but I had anticipated some of the questions. Otaki Theatre, Parapara Memorial Hall, Waikanai Wrestling Club, and Parapara Umu Scouts Hall.
All right, I don't see any further questions for Mr. Jefferson. So if we want to move along, thanks very much, James. Back over to you, Chris.
And Janice McDougall will talk to us about the housing work program on page 54.
Yeah, good morning, Janice. And so actually I should just check before you jump into what page number. So what was that again? Page 5014.
Morena koutou. As is noted in the papers and in the presentation, the housing program was established in the quarter in question. We put the housing program assessment report to you during lockdown. You adopted it, and we have begun work on establishing a housing work program. Also, during the period in question, we submitted a housing development application to the Crown Infrastructure Fund. So it was one of the CIP projects that we put up that was for more public housing in the district. And we continue to engage with a range of central government and other organisations involved in the housing sector.
Just looking for questions. Councillor McCann's in another meeting, so although I imagine he's all over this. Councillor Compton.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So when you say we're still in discussions, we haven't had a yes or no from Crown Infrastructure Partners. It's sort of them coming back for more information, or?
It was not one of the projects that progressed to the next stage, so we have not taken that particular piece of work in that form any further.
All right, I don't see any further questions, so double checking. Thank you very much, Janice. And back over to you, Chris.
Thank you, and now we'll have Natasha Todd to present the Coastal Adaptation Work Program on page 55.
Good morning, everyone. Feels a little bit like a rotating chair. Hopefully we're not on the Graham Norton show and I'm about to be tipped.
That depends on the quality of your commentary, I think.
Right. Actually, from a councillor perspective, it depends on the quality of the chair, because I think there is one around here that does do that. There you go.
Take that one, is it? So in terms of the coastal adaptation work program and the progress that we've been making on this, it seems like much longer ago, but on the 8th of March we held the Takitai Kapiti Climate Change in Our Coast Summit, which was very successful, and in hindsight we were incredibly lucky with the timing and being able to get that completed. We were not to know what was to come. We've also made some progress with the project itself as well. So we've secured tangata whenua partnership on the project through establishing the Art Coastal Advisory Group. In addition, in order for it to be truly community-led, we have been co-designing the process and established a working group for that. The terms of reference for the working group have been finalised, and we've also made good progress in terms of undertaking a request for proposals to get a coastal science and engineering provider on board, and that process is underway.
All right, just opening up for questions. His Worship the Mayor.
Has there been any sort of finalised decision on the number of panels?
No, there hasn't at this point in time. There is more work to be done in terms of working through with the other partners on this. There are some challenges, and I think you'll note in the issues for elected members, the expectations of the breadth of this work has expanded in scope, and that's causing some, there's some challenges to work through with the partners on this in terms of everyone's expectations of what can be achieved.
Just to follow up on that, I'd raise concerns, which are just my personal view and on behalf of my community, but around the smaller amount of groups. Is that still the focus? And obviously the concern was just Otaki being to the north. Some of the members of the working group have got a strong preference for a larger number of groups, more groups, to be considering proposals. There is also from some parties a desire for, given the obligations that Greater Wellington has got under the National Policy Statement for Freshwater, for the work to be expanded to include the Whaitua work as well, which is expected to kick off next year. So we're still in the midst of working that through with all of the various parties. Yeah, I'd like you to.
This is a perfect example of an issue where everybody else is happy to spend our money. Yeah. So if you think about the current climate we're in, we have nowhere near enough resources to deliver those aspirations that you just heard. So the really hard conversation is, what do you do about that? Do you slow down? Does somebody else come to the table? So far there's been a lot of no thanks, but can you please still do what I want? And I'm actually referring mostly to the councils more than the partners. We don't particularly, from my perspective, have an issue with the desires of our partners to wrap this up in a multi-group way, to consider how that links to all of the freshwater issues. But time and money are limited in theory, and so we haven't resolved it, because all I can see is that there's going to be unhappy parties no matter which way this lands, because our ratepayers are not going to be that happy to pay a whole lot more towards this. And we've also got the complication of the national direction at the moment, where the RMA review has strongly suggested that there should be national policy being set on this. That'll take a couple of years to play out. So we're now in this position where we proceed with this and we land on something where national direction then lands on top of us afterwards. This is well, there are words for it to describe it. There's not a simple resolution to it, is all I would say. Thank you for that, Wayne, and I will then lead into my question. I do have His Worship the Mayor, which I'll come to you quickly. And Martin, I haven't forgotten you're down there as well. So for elected members, if you've read your paper, on the bottom of page 55, it has under issues that Greater Wellington Regional Council is unable to contribute financially. That talks in some way directly to what the Chief Executive has just raised around this expectation from them around the Whaitua process,
but actually no money to contribute to that, and that's been an ongoing issue. It has been raised with them. My question relating to that was, and partly goes to you as well, Guru, we had David Lee from Greater Wellington, Councillor Lee from Greater Wellington in the office earlier in the triennium with a willingness to work with us and to a more of an open approach around budget constraints. Do you have anything further to add to that? And then I'll hand it over to you for your comments.
I think we have made a request. I have made a request to our council staff in terms of communication I've had with the regional council for us to meet with them. That is still in due process, I think, and that's one of the topics that we need to discuss, which means the councillors will meet their councillors. That's one. But my question is, on the issue of this matter, how is this interfacing with the Wellington Regional Growth Framework, which this is one of the pillars, the coastal issues. Is there any progress on that side? Because I think that framework is moving faster than anything else. But as it moves faster, is it leaving stuff behind?
History repeating, basically. They have discovered that coastal issues are really significant, and they have decided that they should form a regional collaboration to work on this together. That's what we've been saying as a region for the 6 years that I've been here. It's been discovered by a brand new group as a brand new issue, and they want to start from scratch. If I'm less cynical about it, you're absolutely right that the Regional Growth Framework program of work has been advancing at pace. So the optimist in me says we should leverage that to try and get the right outcome that we've been asking for many years through that process. So it is overtaking all the other processes. Once again, though, there is no budget attached to any of that, other than the work to complete that set of documents. So push will come to shove when there is a committee and budget required to deliver on those actions.
Thank you, Wayne. Your Worship, did you have anything further to add? Councillor Halliday.
It's actually sort of exactly pretty much what you're covering as well, there, Mr. Chair. But I was just curious. You know, we've heard now through Crew and other things. There's certain legal obligations that we have. This Greater Wellington not contributing it, and basically this all being pushed out. Does that impact on any of that at all? Are we sort of all covered?
So we are still, the co-design working group is still working together in partnership on this. So we're still meeting our legal obligations in terms of with all of the parties who need to be involved in the work that we're doing.
If I could just clarify too, Natasha, and it might just be not your deliberate choice of words, the work isn't being pushed out. Greater Wellington aren't contributing, but the work is still continuing. Is that fair to say in terms of the groups and...
Yes, it is fair to say, although there have been some delays to the process because of things like COVID and the need for the councils to have some conversations offline outside of the group itself, which has slowed down in recent times the regularity of that group meeting.
Thank you, but not due to Greater Wellington not contributing, as the Chief Executive has said that would potentially affect any actions that then need resourcing.
That's right.
Thank you. Councillor Elliott, I think I had... Councillor Halliday, do you have further questions? Yeah, sure.
Look, I'm just curious on the first box, point D, who Councillor Nash is.
That's Councillor Thomas Nash from Greater Wellington.
Councillor Elliott.
So at what point can we sit down and have a discussion about our priorities given the current environment? And I am thinking about pieces of work like the whai toa process.
I imagine that will be the LTP, but I'll look to the Chief Executive or...
Oh, we might have a bit of a conversation with you next week, Councillor, at least leading into that, because, you know, we've got some time set aside, so hopefully you'll be excited by the prospect. we've had a pretty interesting conversation just yesterday, actually pulling together all of the stuff that everybody thinks we're required to do, including ourselves. And that required us to go off with something very strong to fortify ourselves. It doesn't even include BAU. So the question you raise is exactly the question that we're working through and we want to talk to you about. So we will start that conversation. It absolutely does lead into the LTP considerations, but I think we also have some immediate issues to think about what do we say yes to, what do we say actually that's probably got to take a back burner right now if there are things like that.
Thanks for that, Wayne. Natasha, I think you're all done. Is that? Thank you. We don't eject you out of the seat? No? All right. Back to you, Chris.
Just hand over to Mark now.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just hold on to my seat over here. So in terms of the corporate IT projects, I guess it's fair to say COVID-19 has driven the bulk of the work. During lockdown, as you've seen in the report, $115,000 of IT spend that was planned for the current financial year, 2021, was necessitated to make sure that staff could work from home. Just by way of a few examples, we've never had a customer call centre needing to take calls at home. We've, as part of our community support package, we've never had the accounts payable team actually having to handle invoices and pay suppliers from home. We've never had a rates team having to issue rates invoices and deal to rates queries from home. And that extends across the whole organisation. So in terms of the IT team, they were very, very busy just making sure that we could best support our staff. And it went from actually making sure they had the equipment, IT equipment, office chairs, because obviously we didn't know how long we were going to be working from home for. So lots of resilience work has been done, and it was really responding to COVID-19 so that we could keep it, we could best support our essential workers. My apologies. I'm on page 56 of the agenda. I will just say Microsoft Teams, that's an online collaboration tool that was rolled out to staff. That was really a godsend. We were able to connect with our teams. The IT team had changed the platform, which drives our email, which meant that we could roll MS Teams out. So as you know, we were running MS Teams and we were running Zoom meetings, so that was, and also with the council meetings, we were running our Zoom meetings. Other things that have also been done in the IT space is new fibre networks. We now have fibre installed at the Otaki Library and Service Centre, the Waikanai Service Centre, the Waikanai Water Treatment Plant, and the Coastlands Aquatics Centre. And the accounts payable automation project that commenced in March, and that has continued to go and actually goes out because of the IT support. The team were able to continue to work on that project, and that goes live on Monday. Fingers crossed.
His Worship the Mayor.
The Prime Minister's statement recently that the new normal is going to be COVID levels going up and down over a number of years. Never said. There's no definition of how many years it will be. What is the new normal for us in terms of staff having a permanent access to the technology at home?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So our Chief Information Officer actually purchased our sort of our annual quota of laptops and monitors in one go, knowing that we were likely to go up and down. So with the Prime Minister's announcement last week, the senior leadership team met under urgency, and we identified those staff members that had the priority needs for those additional laptops and monitors. The way of the world, lots of our monitors in the office are actually mounted on stands to the desk. So we've gone and purchased 50 freestanding monitors. So we have already distributed our full year allocation of IT equipment. We're starting with those staff members with the highest needs, and we're still continuing to look at that. So we are doing lots of work in that space, but we certainly don't have the budget so that every single staff member can have a workstation at home and a workstation in the office. And so we're working through that on a prioritisation. If we need to buy more laptops and more equipment, we certainly will. So we're working through that process so that we can transition between the levels as quickly as possible. We're also working through the resilience, making sure that our servers, the physical location of our servers, are now up in Auckland. And it's just a constant area that we're focusing on to make sure that when staff do have to go home or work from home, they can fully work from home.
So two questions attached to that. One is the health and safety issue, because that becomes their office at home becomes our space, health safety wise. That's one area. The other one is, of course, the overlay of council's security in terms of data. Is there any risk to that?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of the health and safety obligations on the council as an employer, so we're working through that. Some of our working from home policy is being updated. So, whilst we're not on alert level 4, it is a choice. So, staff members, so now staff can work from home. To maximise efficiency, staff have the choice of working in the office and working from home. Obviously, under alert level 2, we need to have the social distancing requirement. The question really is, are we obligated to do workstation assessments for people at home? And the answer at the moment is no, we're not, because it's not compulsory that you have to work from home. But we are working through a working from home policy to give more guidance and support to staff. In terms of, I guess, the risk of cybersecurity breaches and privacy issues, so we're working through all of that as well. That's part of our resilience program to make sure that with people working from home, there's greater controls over data security. Even when we were in alert level 4 lockdown, we were putting out parameters and guidance to staff to not send, documents via email, but to use our electronic document management system. And our Chief Information Officer is constantly looking at the making sure that we're up to date with our cybersecurity risks, that we're mitigating that as best we can, because obviously we took a deep interest of what was happening in Australia and jumped on that straight away. So we can't guarantee we will never be subject to attacks, but we take our cybersecurity risk extremely seriously. So the Chief Information Officer is working through that, and we report back to the SLT.
The question to the Chief Executive. I can see from the staff side, management side, some safeguards have been applied, or you're thinking of applying, working at it. What about the governance side in terms of confidentiality and using the electronic things working from home? Any thought given to that? Just asking.
It's the same issue. The way you're set up in the cloud both enhances resilience, but also can create more cyber risk. So anything that we apply for staff, we would normally look to roll out for elected members as well. So I don't know if you want to add any more detail, Mark, but it is a good question and one we try to make sure we are keeping up to date on.
Thank you.
Councillor Pravanov.
Mark, so I just wanted to follow up on the Mayor's question. So from what you're saying, there's no type of Citrix system where staff can log on remotely to all the to the server from home. Is that correct?
So through you, Mr. Chair, if I heard you correctly, no, staff can fully work from home. They can work remotely. We have 3 different channels where people can access the network, they can access their files. So effectively they can work from home. The complications came in, for example, with our call centre. How does that work? So So staff have been working very hard with the IT team. We've obviously been presented a number of challenges, but not all of our officers can work from home. It depends on the nature of the role. So, obviously lifeguards, for example. But staff, if they need to access council documents or files or the network, provided they've got a computer, they can access in a safe, controlled environment.
Yes. Okay. So a follow-up question to that is that you've talked about providing staff with laptops. So is there any mechanism where instead of actually spending money on laptops, they can actually use their own devices, and with various protections around using those?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Look, that's a really good question. So, as I said right up front, we simply don't have the budget to be able to give all staff laptops or desktops or a complete workstation from home. So we have a triage process at the moment. So we do have a number of staff, lots of our staff, not everyone has laptops. Some have laptops, some have desktops. So our triage system is looking at those that do you have a personal computer from home? Can you use that? If the answer is no, do you need what type of computer do you need? So within certain parts of our organisation, the software that they need to access, laptops can't cope with that. So where they do have a personal laptop, then if they have a personal computer at home that they can access, they can work from home using their personal computer, then they sort of come off the triage list. We do have staff that don't have a laptop and don't have computers at home. So there's a priority process that we work through, and I can say it was quite staggering how quickly our full allocation of laptops got allocated from last week. So, yep, we're constantly doing more in that space, but where we want to get to is people can work from home as quickly as possible.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mark, do you run courses for staff on Microsoft applications, Zoom, and other software? Are these courses run and available to all staff? And if the answer is yes, in the last 6 months, roughly how many courses have you conducted for staff?
So through you, Mr. Chair, look, we don't officially run any courses on how to use Zoom or MS Teams. MS Teams so I can't give you the numbers, so we don't officially run anything. But in terms of part of our induction process, and we have new staff coming in, when they're inducted, they'll be shown how to use the systems relevant to their role. With MS Teams, when that was rolled out, that was new to everyone. So our IT system had there were some laminated help guides. We put instructions on the website. So we're very agile in that space. But no, we don't run a how to Zoom course or a how to MS Teams. But we did set up, in terms of our IT support team, we do have a service desk. You can ring them directly via a dedicated phone line. You can email them. And that will extend to them actually calling you, working through your issue. We saw some great advances in technology during lockdown. So our IT team, whether you had a council device or was your own personal computer, if you're having an issue, you have to provide permission for our IT team, but they can actually access your system and they can work through and show you, simple things like how to open an Excel document, or there may be some settings that were wrong. No, we don't do our own training, but we are looking at providing more training to staff through our refreshed induction program.
All right, Tam, I don't see any further questions, so we want to move on to the policy work program. It's on page 57.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So as we have said before, our central government is in the delivery phase. So we have done a number of submissions. They are both in the report and on the screen for emphasis. Councillor Compton and I attended the Selects Committee on the infrastructure funding and financing bill, and maybe it was us, maybe it wasn't, but the LGFA did increase the alternate debt covenants, which is one of our leading points. So we have been busy, obviously, doing submissions. In addition to that, because of COVID-19, we couldn't actually get to the Strategy and Operations Committee, but we have obviously kept we've kept progressing our policy work program, and we did provide an update to this committee in July of where we're at. And obviously with COVID-19, that has delayed the momentum of some of the initiatives in the policy work program. And as we reported very recently, in terms of the beach bylaw, that has kicked out the time frame for the phase 1 pre-consultation engagement. But we are looking to work with this committee to go out to consultation October, November, with the target adoption of a new bylaw by March 2021, 3 months in advance of the June 2021 statutory time frame.
Thanks, Mark. Mr. Burns.
Yeah, 10 submissions, that's quite an impressive amount in 6 months, and it must take up quite a lot of staff time and resources. What is the requirement around council making submissions to national legislation? Do we have to do that, or is that an optional arrangement?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, so we provide a advocacy role on behalf of the community. So we have a team that does an environmental scan of all the submissions that are coming out, and where that impacts on the community, the senior leadership team will have a first look at the submissions. They are pretty obvious which ones we do need to provide an advocacy role. And with some of them that are very technical, we'll do a briefing with the council prior to the paper, but our default is to, where we know we have to advocate on behalf of the community, we prepare the submission, we do come to the committee or the council, depending on the time frame. There have been a couple of these submissions that have come out where there just hasn't been a chance to have the council approve the remarks. But yes, we come and seek formal approval, we make the submission, and 1 or 2 of them we end up going and presenting or talking to our submission. But it's our advocacy role that we uphold.
Is that a requirement, or is it more an optional choice?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it's not a legislative requirement, but it is part of our role to advise the councillors of issues that impact the community.
Mr. Burns, if I could add to that, it's not my understanding it's a requirement. However, any of these which are enacted have a flow-on effect on this council and this community. So it's important for us to have our say, because as an example, a levy could increase, which we then need to either pass on or pay, or we, in terms of influencing those decisions, it might have better benefits for our ratepayers. So in my experience, it's been important to contribute to that. And I don't know whether Mr. Councillor Compton wants to add to that, having gone to the select committee on a particular topic. But certainly, it's like if you don't vote, you can't complain. If you don't have a say on the submissions that we have, then if you don't like what comes out the other end, it's sort of your own fault.
Yeah, so just speaking to that, when Mark and I went and presented on the infrastructure funding and financing bill, the big point we were making is that the cheaper way to do what they were looking at in terms of the special purpose vehicles was to lift LGFA funding covenants so that councils could access more debt at a cheaper rate without the additional overheads that SPVs have with them. And what do we know? That those covenants have been lifted because it's recognised that that's a better way for councils to raise money, because they're effectively raising it at the same cost as the government, which at the moment is next to nothing. So it's that sort of thing where the more voices we have added to it to actually reinforce that point, because other councils are in the same position, them advocating for the same things, unless they're right at their borrowing cap, and then they might be in a slightly different position. But yeah, it's those sorts of things that it's good to have our voices heard at the table like that. And I wouldn't argue that our submission was the reason why those covenants got lifted, but it's just all part of making sure that you build that narrative across the sector to get that change happening.
It's your stunning presentation, Gwyn. His Worship the Mayor.
The other thing to remember is that we don't do the heavy lifting ourselves. A lot of the time, the local government New Zealand, which has got a very strong team of policy wallahs, if you can call them that, and we tag on to this. And the other issue you need to consider also, that when you have submissions to national legislations, when councils get to discuss it, it broadens your perspective that we are not living what in my culture they say, a toad under a coconut shell. Because there's a whole world out there that impinges, like the chairman said, that has a bearing on our work. So that's a useful avenue for us to expand our local government responsibilities by having a national perspective as what affects other councils also.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions over the coffee break, His Worship will explain to you what a wallah is. So hand that back to you, Mark.
Our last piece in the cross-council work program is carbon and energy management, where I can hand over to Sean Mallon. After that, we'll talk through the place and space activities.
Morning, Sean.
Morning, Mr. Chair, councillors, community board members. So there's a couple of things there. The fleet review work has started, so Fleetwise are carrying out a review there across the fleet to look at fit for purpose. Also look at optimisation, and then also look at opportunities for ongoing renewals and maintenance and management of that fleet. Obviously, COVID has slowed that down, and optimisation is an area which is relatively low, obviously, at the moment. But so it will mean that the report will take a little bit longer as we extend that to look at what sort of normal, or if we do get back to normal use of that fleet, looks like. Energise Otaki, the wastewater treatment plant solar project, that work is progressing. The lease has been signed, the agreement's been signed there, and they're not sure if they've actually physically started the work, but that again may have been impacted by COVID. And the last item there is looking at, I guess, further options for energy management or energy reduction offsets at the Otaki pool.
Thank you, Sean. I know with the Otaki pool as an example, we took a little bit of flack from Low Carbon Kapiti in terms of the design of that pool, and that was identified as an easy win in their list of things that we could be doing in terms of our response to the climate declaration. Has those costs that's in the report on page 59 come in higher than it's expected, or is that in line with what Low Carbon was saying we should or could do?
I couldn't answer the question regarding Low Carbon's numbers. The detail with regard to that particular project is sitting sort of with James's area, but I don't know what their numbers were in terms of the.
Look, I'm happy to take that one offline.
Sure.
Just interested in the why behind that. I've got Mr. Burns.
Yes, the boiler in the. How old is that?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that. I can certainly find out and let you know. If it's up for replacement, then you would expect it's probably 10 or 15 years old, but again, I'd have to get someone to check.
Could I just clarify, I guess in the interest of just being on the same page, the line there isn't around replacing the boiler because of age, it is more around the response to the climate declaration, climate change. It's not a renewals. Thank you. Mr. Burns, I've got you still down. Did you have any further questions on that? Thank you. I don't see any other questions from elected members, so if we want to move on to the next one, just aware of time, place and space. And Mr. Jefferson's back again.
Hello again, councillors, your worship, community board members. Look, I think the recurring theme coming through this morning as we review quarters 3 and 4 is the impact of COVID, and that is no less an impact than in the place and space area, and we'll canvass some of that together. So look, we'll start with parks and open spaces, and from a finance, starting at the top right-hand corner, minor variance in terms of the operating expenditure and operating income was favourable. Actually came in about 180,000 favourable due to subdivisions coming online and us being able to pick up that extra reserve financial contributions. Capital expenditure also shown as favourable. There was a 600,000 underspend, largely due to that continual carryover of the 200,000 that's been earmarked for the escarpment, and also the deferral of the works up at Otaki Beach there due to the navigation of those underlying issues. Some KPIs, all 11 achieved, and they are on your pages 61 and to 65. And really the highlights is the continual renewal of the playgrounds that are going on, and the coastal work that Rob is doing, restoration work that Rob is doing, and also the installation of the Tohora artworks down at Maclean's Park in partnership with the libraries and arts team. I think the other highlight for me is the inaugural movies at Waikanae Park. Some of those really nice things to be able to do, but the sobering one on that first slide was the preparation of the cemetery's pandemic response as we were planning for those potentially 200 deaths. The flip side, the upside is on the next slide, is Alison took a letter cross-council piece of work to remedy the Waikanae community market issue that had been kicking around for many years, and my understanding is that has been really successful and well received. So we can do it when we put our minds to it, and had that opportunity to be able to do that. And also in that parks team, Alison and Rob in particular continue to work and support that Waikanae Rivers to Mountain restoration project, and that's just gathering momentum. So before we move on to the next lot of slides, is there any questions emerging from that?
So team questions from 61 to 65. I have Iswish the Mayor down first, and then Guy Burns second.
Just taking the opportunity to thank Jill for the tremendous work that you did in getting the Waikanae Saturday market sort of functioning as it should. It's been a sore, festering sore for many years, and I congratulate you for rolling your sleeves up and getting it done. Well done.
Yeah, and if I could just tautoko that, Jill and Alison and the team involved, certainly the feedback that I heard, not directly from market operators, just to be honest, but just online, the comments that I'd seen, the feedback that I'd heard from others was that the team worked really hard, and they appreciated the commitment from Alison and the team to get the market to where it was. And if I could add, ironically, not long after the market opened, or maybe even the week, in the news was the issues with the market down in Tawa or Johnsonville. So this is not a Kapiti issue, this is a market issue, it's a national issue. So Jill, did you want to add something? And then I'll come to Mr. Burns.
Sorry. Okay, thanks. Oh no, I just wanted to add, really, it was a very worthwhile project, and a huge thank you to Alison and her team. They stepped up and went far beyond the call of duty, and so I'd like to record our thanks to them for doing that.
Thank you. And now Mr. Burns. Oh, sorry, Councillor Pravanov, it's a follow-on, Guy, and then I'll come to you.
So thank you. Yes, so I would like to commend the work of council staff and of Jill to get this over the line, and I also think it was so this is something that's been, as was mentioned, has been festering for some time, and I'd like to commend the community board for saying, right, we're going to deal with this.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Mr. Burns.
Yes, the remedy and escarpment, what's that, the work involving there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's the historic deforestation, and I probably don't know enough about the detail, but deforestation on council land, and then a huge storm event that impacted all of the western coastline right down through into Porirua, and a subsequent slip onto the Kiwi Rail land, and that debate about Kiwi Rail claiming that we're responsible and negligent, and that ongoing piece of work, and it is ongoing, and at some point in the near future we'll bring you a briefing when we get better understanding, but it is now a matter that's before the court.
Councillor Hanford.
Just considering the success of the movie night in the park, something through the Re-envisioning Kpis survey that we did during lockdown was movies in the park, and people wanted to see more of that moving out of lockdown. I'm just wondering if there's a plan and what kind of time frame that would sit within to hold more events along the lines of that.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm not aware of a firm plan, but I know the team were really excited by the response they got, and COVID and other events notwithstanding, I envisage that when the weather settles down, there will be an opportunity to explore. But I'll get something and bring it back. Yep.
Councillor Hanford, did you have any others? Councillor Halliday.
Actually, just following on from Councillor Hanford there, I was actually at the event, and absolutely fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Had some friends with us as well. Look, I actually just wanted to pass on some feedback from the Waramati Rugby League Club. They applied for a grant at our community board meeting on Tuesday. I went to their AGM on Sunday, but they had very high praise with regards to the council team and the parks team with regards to the upgrade work that they've been doing. They've been turning that club around, and were very, very complimentary at their AGM of the council staff and the council team and the effort they've put into the system through that process. So I just wanted to pass that on.
Yeah, look, thank you. That's thank you. Yep.
Thanks, Martin. So, look, we're just going to move on to Recreation and Leisure, page 66.
So again, elected members, this is really largely the libraries and aquatics area, and I'll just bring my slides up, and again, just take you through the similar approach in the top right-hand corner, the expenditure and revenue. Interestingly, this one balances itself out. Operating expenditure was favourable due to savings in maintenance costs and facility operations, unfortunately offset, particularly in the aquatic space, by unfavourable income, very, very closely matched, so we came out balanced there. Capital expenditure is 460,000 underspent, largely due, and I think we've reported it previously, just to having Mahara Gallery on hold until we get greater certainty of funding. There is money there to progress the detailed design, but we've just put a hold on that until we get greater certainty about where that project will be going longer term. Again, the KPIs off target, some of those, as you would expect, and we look at libraries first, and a significant reduction and difference. Certainly at the end of Q3, we were on track to meet our KPIs, and then the impact, obviously, of closing the libraries, and you see the numbers there in terms of where we've ended up year end. One of the interesting things, and I think the challenge for the libraries team as we start to do that library strategy or re-envisaging libraries, is a 3,400% uptake on ebooks. Now, I don't know what the base numbers are, but it's an opportunity for the team to think about what we do in that e-space and the services we offer there. So. And then the last bullet point, you will recall that as part of the annual plan this last year, there was a reduction in the book budget, but the team put their minds to it and actually look at the number of items that have been added to the collection across the district is better than 50%, and they were just looking at the popular, or particularly those popular titles and things, and managed to continue to add to the collection. I think there's a next slide. Yep, as talked about earlier, you know, the getting that jewel into the Maclean Park, and has been, certainly the feedback we've received has been very, very well received. And Yeah, sprucing up Mahara Place while we decide what we're doing with the existing building and where services may go. And this was a tilt to Francis Hodgkins and that collection that we've hopefully got secured for Mahara Gallery. But this is a nice way of freshening up Mahara Place, and it was nice to be able to support the artists through that.
Questions now?
Yeah.
Got Jocelyn first. Councillor Pravanov, and then I have a couple of others.
So through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Jefferson, I just wanted to commend the comments, or basically commend the artwork on the Waikanae Library. Yesterday we had the opening for that, or the blessing for it. The photograph here looks stunning, and in reality it also looks stunning, and you know, it's a real joint project between council staff, Janet and local artists, and it's brilliant. It was actually difficult the timing too with COVID, but you know, we've got, you know, it's beautiful. So the other, I have a question in relation, my page has just disappeared, is to do with on page 67, to do with the Waikanae pool. This is actually work that was scheduled in Q4 on the hydroslide, water treatment solution and chemical slurry tank. I see that it wasn't able to be completed. I'm just wondering whether that is going to be timetabled before the pool opens in the summertime. Thank you.
Councillor Halliday.
Mine's actually a statement more than a question, sorry, and it's just like fantastic seeing that artwork in Mahara Place. Bring it on. I'd love to see a bit more of it around the district. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Holborough.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us leave to make comment on these items as we go through. I think it's really good to touch on them as the presentation progresses. Just while we're on that photo, I'd just like to acknowledge Bodie Vincent and the work he did on that sculpture on the right-hand side there. It's called the Love Stone, and I think the upgrade of that was funded through the town centre upgrade, and it was a huge piece of work, kind of basically recreating that beautiful piece. And I've got a lovely photo of it with the grey sky behind that I took yesterday at the blessing. So I just wanted to acknowledge him, and also that kind of wider work that goes on in public art in the district, and also acknowledge the work of the staff getting this mural across the line, and also the Tohora Rising sculpture. That was a long process and involved a lot of consultation, discussion, conversations with iwi, and a lot of community consultation as well. So I just think, just while we're here, it's timely to acknowledge that work that goes in. And also acknowledge the great turnout that happened on the day from Tangata Whenua. You can see in that photo. It was a really special blessing, and well worth seeing at night time, as you see in the bottom there, and also spend a little bit of time and open your ears, because there's also a little bit of a sound element to that sculpture as well.
Back to you, Mr. Jefferson.
Chris, Aquatics. Yeah, this is just finishing off that second bit, and as indicated, the Aquatics numbers are down. Significant, again, on track at the end of the third quarter to meet our targets for year end, but a significant impact in accessing the pools, particularly with Waikanae having closed as well for the season. So happy to take any questions there.
I don't see any, and I see we've got community facilities next. Is that still you?
It still is. I'm sorry.
No, look, I'm just asking because I'm looking at the time and I'm just seeing whether people are getting a bit restless and need a stop. I appreciate we did stop for a few minutes earlier. Is everyone all right to box on? We could be here all day if we don't get going. Looking around the room. Back over to you, James.
I'll be as prompt as I can be. So again, following the same pattern, income was good, favourable, again largely to development contributions coming through for that community infrastructure. Operating expenditure was also favourable by 400k, and that's largely due to lower costs. We were able to negotiate a much cleaner exit, no pun intended, from the cleantech site, and reduce costs there, but also the reduced operating costs during the COVID lockdown. Capital expenditure, $1 million underspent, and again, trying to be prudent around the Parapara Memorial Hall in particular, and as it turns out, we've been able to put a bid in that may represent longer term savings for ratepayers there. And that question that came up earlier, I think, around the access control, that they will be carried over. That's the internal security swipe systems. The animal management shelter has just been completed in June, and is a fantastic facility, and the work they've done down there really brings it up to not only MPI requirements, but something that I'm comfortable with, and I'm sure you will be, in terms of the services we offer to animal lovers and owners, and in terms of having taking good care of those animals when they're with us, and it is a much better facility now, and certainly attracting interest regionally. The maintenance work for our community centre just behind us here will give us another 18 months, again, as we promised with Amy P, to bring you back that much more holistic view of our community facilities in particular. And also the Waikanai Library work is progressing well with that project advisory group, and we had a workshop scheduled with you, I think, for earlier this week, but just with some of the things that are going on, that's been postponed. But we'll bring some thinking on how that group's evolving. So happy to take, Chris, what's the next slide? Is it? Oh yeah, still me. So again, give you that reassurance around the housing for older persons portfolio. Team are making good progress. There were a couple that got caught up in COVID, a couple of renewals. They have been finished, so the numbers are slightly improved. And there is significant interest in people wanting to avail themselves. Interestingly enough, south of Uptake is the flavour that's coming through. Condition surveys, as we gave you a briefing last month with Crispin and I, all of that condition surveys have been completed, and those particularly in the first quarter of this year. And as we've indicated, it confirms that we've got an ageing property portfolio and a couple of key themes coming through there. So happy to take any questions on that.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. I just wanted to follow up on page 73, in relation to the Paparamu College Gymnasium. I see this has been deferred due to delays obtained from Ministry of Education. I'm just wondering if you're able to provide any bit more information around that, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we have a significant funding agreement with them that goes back many, many years and ties us in for a few more years yet, I believe, that we will pick up 50% of the cost of some of these things. Just simply Ministry of Education and the college haven't been ready to go, is my understanding, and I don't know if Martin... Yeah.
We have a better idea on the situation there. We got briefed on it by Crispin last week, himself and Bernie. And it's a 50-year arrangement. We're into the last 5 years. I think that's correct. But we'll be getting ourselves up to speed with that. This is the first meeting we've had with that group, and that's scheduled for next Wednesday.
And that wasn't a COVID impact. That's actually been just some of those slower Ministry of Education processes.
Councillor Holborough.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. The Parapara Memorial Hall, the no change from last quarter and the project on hold pending determination of hall user demand. When can we expect that determination to be happening, and what how are we deciding what the future is of facilities like that? I know we had a facilities review that happened some years ago, and it did determine kind of user demand and things like that. Are we planning to update that piece of work? Is it a long-term plan discussion? Just wondering what's happening there.
Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair. That is the Asset Management Improvement Program, or as I call it, shorten it, AMEP. That is all part of that work, is to bring back condition surveys, which we've done, indicative costs, but much more importantly, usage. And I've asked the team to take a ward-by-ward approach, just to chunk things. You're right, the 2017 strategy, I think, is still robust and gives enough guidance, and I think we referred you to that, and I sent the link out to that, and there's a whole, the appendix that sits behind that also indicates, it probably needs a refresh, but indicates who else is providing community facilities in the community other than council. And there's a lot of work and detail, but that is what I anticipate being put into the LTP, and talked with Crispin as recently as yesterday afternoon, expectation around what the usage is and whether we're getting a good return on our investment, and then bring that in here, socialise that with you, and have some conversations through the LTP with community.
Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, James. I'm wondering if there might be the opportunity for us to have a wee look at the new upgraded Animal Management Centre. I'd be keen to have a look, and also, while down in that neck of the woods, wanted to ask how the current EOC actual facility building and what's provided there stand up over to the demand at the COVID time. You know, did you find that that worked well and that it's sufficient, or did you find that there are some improvements that could be made, given that COVID is still an ongoing issue?
Certainly, to your first point, Animal Management Centre, for those that are interested, maybe flick me an email, and I'll ask the team to take you through that in an appropriate time, with together with Jackie and her crew, and they can talk about how it functions. The second point, look, actually through the ELC through COVID, and I think I refer back to Mark's earlier comments, a lot of the staff, virtually all of us, worked remotely, and ran the ELC remotely. We were the first ELC to go virtual in the region, and it worked really, really well. And as we're preparing for the second wave, some staff are saying, look, we feel we're compromised, or we live with compromised people. So if we do have to stand the ELC up, I intend to run a hybrid model, because we can operate physically and remotely. The one downside to the first wave was working remotely. We lost some of that interconnectedness, and people had to spend a lot of time on Teams just catching up. So and certainly as a controller, where you stand at the back of the room and listen to the interactions, you miss a little bit of that. That's why I'm keen to run a hybrid model and just pick up some of that, those nuances that you can do. So.
If I could just add to that around the upgrade of the dog shelter, the video that was produced was top notch. I know, Wayne, that's had been a desire of you to get that sort of stuff more out there, and that was received really well within the community. So the feedback on that particular post on the council's Facebook page was really strong and positive, and it was really well put together. So moving along.
I think you get a break from me next. Is that right, Chris? It's Janice? Yes. Pardon?
So team, I just want to check in. Yeah, I just want to check in with you all again. We have an option to take a 10-minute if people want to. We've been going for a wee while now. 9:30. We had a bit of a break. Nods, no, yays, nays.
Yeah, no.
We had to have debate, and there are some issues I want to bring up in debate. Yeah. Thank you.
Was more than an hour.